What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. And in today's video, we have some Detroit Lions news. The Lions have made some roster moves today, and I think there's a roster move that the Lions made today that could have a bigger impact than maybe we expect. So let's get it started.
Way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, and we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down. And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down. And when we do, we're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome everybody to another video. Glad you guys are here. And we got some roster moves to dive into. The Lions have made some moves today, and they're just not done yet. I don't think the Lions are done yet. They still have 2 open spots on their 53-man roster. It could be as simple as adding 2 players for the practice squad to the 53-man roster, but then they would have 2 spots open on the practice squad. And I think they'll be adding players to fill that back up. That could be players that were already here. It could be some new guys. So I don't think the Lions are done just yet with making roster moves. That's why I wanted to hold off, but they haven't done anything yet. So we'll just keep an eye on that. I'll keep you guys updated if the Lions make something happen. However, they did make some moves today, and that's where I want to start off. Let's start off on the practice squad. Notable move at the receiver position that the Lions made. This was deciding to waive rookie receiver Sage Surratt, but also bringing back receiver Geronimo Allison. An interesting move here, okay? You guys remember the first receiver that we waived off the practice squad, once, we put our practice squad together, was Javon McKinley, and they decided to keep Sage Surratt. Now Sage Surratt has been waived. The practice squad is now full at 16 players after bringing back Geronimo Allison. This is very, very interesting. So the Lions did have Sage Surratt for a little while, so they got to see him in practice and decide what they thought. And I thought he did stick out a little bit more in practice, clearly, than he did in the preseason. So it surprised me when the Lions initially waived Javon McKinley over Sage Surratt. That one really shocked me. But now they have made the decision to bring back Geronimo Allison. Now that's not super surprising on its own, because Allison played, in my opinion, pretty darn well in the preseason. I thought he played well enough to possibly earn a roster spot. Now he's been brought back to the practice squad. I thought he'd be someone that would initially be brought back, but he wasn't. It was the Javons, it was the Sage Surratts, but now here he is on the Lions practice squad. He's a guy that did some things that I didn't really expect of him, and that was making plays once the ball was in his hands. Look, Geronimo Allison is a much better X receiver. He's a much better outside threat. And with Tyrell Williams in concussion protocol, you need to bring him and activate him. They definitely could, because that's where Geronimo Allison is at his best. He's at his best on the outside, an X receiver. We saw it with Green Bay. They tried to push him inside and make him kind of like a big slot, and that didn't work super well, but that's kind of what Tyrell Williams brings. At a higher level, of course, but he does do enough, and he also has the background where if you need him because you don't have Tyrell Williams, he can be an option to bring up. There are some similarities within their game. Tyrell was much better when playing the slot position than Geronimo Allison was, but we do have Anthony Lynn, who brought that out of Tyrell Williams, so we'll see what happens. This signing makes sense considering the Tyrell Williams injury. I believe because the game is on Monday, we don't have the official injury report from today's practice from either side. At least we haven't gotten it yet, but I don't think we'll get it from either side. However, we do have a few updates from the Lions side, and that is that there was no practice from Tyrell Williams, which is obviously not good news, and also Kevin Strong. So keep an eye on that, because that, Bruce Hector, having him on the practice squad, he's definitely someone that could be promoted if Kevin Strong can't play, and I would bet that they would do that. Cornell is still out because of suspension, and Deshaun Hand is still on IR. Those 2 can't come back for this week. But I definitely look at the Tyrell Williams injury, and I think in the Lions' mindset is that, hey, without Tyrell Williams, if he can't go, who do we rather have on, promoted to the roster? Sage Surratt or Geronimo Allison? You're taking Geronimo. Plus, Geronimo was a former Packer, so maybe he can give us a little inside information, a little inside scoop. I don't know. We did not see Kadero Hodge last week. He was a healthy scratch, so we'll see where the Lions are at with him this week if that changes. We did see Trinity Benson. I think Benson is going to be a nice part of this offense, but Hodge has some of that size, but he's also got a lot more speed than Geronimo. Kadero Hodge gives me some Tyrell Williams vibes as well, as a guy that can kind of do that, can play Z, can play the slot, can play on the outside. So there's a lot that he can do as well. I mean, there's a reason the Lions brought in Kadero Hodge and they decided to claim him, or they put the claim out and they rewarded him. I liked Hodge. I thought he had the speed, he's got size, he's got versatility, he had good hands. There's a lot to like about Hodge. I was like, okay, this is a nice fit. So I would like to see this guy play if Tyrell Williams can't play. But at the same time, there's also a reason the Lions decided to bring back Geronimo Allison to the practice squad, because maybe they're not super completely confident about Kadero Hodge through the practice that they've seen so far. So maybe it's just a precautionary thing where it's like, hey, let's at least have another backup to a Kadero Hodge, where if Tyrell Williams can't play, these 2 can compete. We'll make a decision, because we have seen Allison produce on the field in the preseason. He knows this system. So we'll see where they're at. I think Benson is obviously someone that will play once again, no matter if Tyrell Williams plays or not. If Williams plays, there's a good chance that neither of them not active for this game. So we'll see where it goes from here. but it's definitely a spot to keep an eye on. The injury report will probably come out tomorrow, so this week's just kind of a little thrown off. And tomorrow's when I'm aiming to throw out my first game plan video. I want to do 2 this week for offense and defense. Offense will probably be tomorrow. After watching that Packers game, it's not as bad as the score looks, to be honest with you. Like the 38-3, it's not that terrible. I mean, just a quick little note here. The New Orleans Saints were set up by great field position multiple times. They really didn't move the ball a ton. The receivers didn't do a whole lot. It was just Jameis Winston was running, beating the man coverage in the back end. We'll get into it tomorrow. I'm sorry. I'm getting too off topic. The Detroit Lions have signed cornerback Daryl Worley to their practice squad. Now, this is a big one. This is someone that definitely could be promoted for this Monday Night Football game. There's no guarantee because he's coming in on a Wednesday. Even if he practices today, it's still a very short week. We saw kind of Josh Norman. He came in Monday for San Francisco and he didn't get the start. So just keep an eye on that. Even if he's not promoted this week, I mean, this is an option that could be promoted down the road, right? A week from now, because Okuda's out for the entire season. So you're going to have to figure this out from now throughout the rest of the year. And the Lions could definitely bring in other cornerbacks as well, which I think they probably will, to compete depending on how they feel about Daryl Worley. They still have 2 roster spots open, but even down the road. The extra day could also help out Tyrell Williams. I hope it does. I would love to have Tyrell back on the field. Daryl Worley spends his first 2 seasons with the Carolina Panthers there. You know, he's improving. He's getting better. His second season, he has 2 interceptions. But that's when things got kind of ugly. That 2018 offseason, you know, heading into that 2018 season, things got kind of weird. So he was traded away from the Carolina Panthers to the Philadelphia Eagles for receiver Torrey Smith. All right, so just an exchange there. Brought in by Philadelphia, but it didn't last very long because he got in trouble in the offseason, apparently driving under the influence. He was arrested. I guess he had to get tased. Obviously, they ended up releasing the guy because he was arrested. Then he was picked up by the Raiders. And what's unfortunate about all of that is that those kind of things happened back in college as well, and it scared some teams heading into the draft, which makes sense. But then you saw it again in the NFL. You hate to see it. So after he gets released, he is later picked up by the Raiders. The first 4 weeks for that season, he ends up being suspended. Then towards the end of the year, he gets placed on IR. But in the games that he does play in 2018, his stats aren't completely terrible. 22 completions on 38 targets. He gave up 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, 12.4 yards per completion. But they liked him enough to put the tender on him to bring him back for 2019, and that's what we saw. In 2019, he had his best statistical season. He was kind of a top guy for the Raiders in 2019. You look at the stats, 46 completions on 86 targets. That's a 53% completion percentage. All right, he also earned his highest PFF grade in terms of coverage, if you want to know that as well. 5 touchdowns were still given up, 1 interception, 15.5 yards per completion, and a 95.6 passer rating. The completion percentage was good allowed, but as you can see that he gave up a lot of touchdowns. Come back to this 2019 season because it's pretty important to get back to that. However, 2020 he's kind of bounced around between multiple different teams. The stats look awful. 12 completions on 18 targets, 5 touchdowns, no picks, and that only happened in a few games. Like, he wasn't playing that much. He ended up getting benched that season. Chidobe Awuzie went down, so he got a big role in that season for Dallas. And yeah, it's not going to be benched when you're talking about one of the worst defenses in history last season, but at the same time, it was also a terrible defense, so everybody struggled. When you look at that 2019 season, I initially head into it, I'm just thinking, okay, I'm just going to watch him as a cornerback. What do I like, what I don't like? And I got some notes there. All 22 needs to come back, man. They're saying it's coming back week 1 to week 2. Please come back soon, man. I miss it because it's hard to watch secondary players when you can't see the whole field. Go watch it, and I'm watching. I actually started off with the Lions game that year because he had an incredible interception, which was pretty darn awesome, actually. And remember, the Raiders beat us on the 1-yard line into that game. He gave up some completions, but you got some pretty easy takeaways from who he is as a cornerback, what type of cornerback that he is. I watched a few games. I also took a look back at college a little bit at West Virginia, and it's kind of the same notes. He's a 6'1", 215-pound cornerback. Obviously, that's a lot of size, similar to a guy like Dunbar, similar to an Iffy, similar to a Jacobs, sort of. He's got a lot of size. That's the kind of physical cornerbacks the Lions went. Now, speed-wise, he's not very fast. 40, which is not great for a cornerback. Neither is a 1.58-second 10-yard split. The explosiveness, the top-end speed is not really there. 35.5-inch vertical, pretty good, and 14 bench press reps. He's a physical corner that plays well in a press bail technique. He's a good press cornerback. I really like him the best is playing in zone coverage as a cover corner, that he's able to play downhill. He can kind of sit in a soft zone coverage, and then he can work down on things, lay some big hits. He's a super aggressive player when the ball is thrown in his direction. So there's a lot to like in terms of the physicality. Super long arms, 33.5-inch arms, over 10-inch hands. He's a very well-built, physically built cornerback. A lot of iffy vibes. And when you watch him, he's at his best really going with some of those bigger receivers. At the cornerback, you line him up against a Tyrell Williams or against the Lions, a Galladay and Jones. You had a little bit of success there because of those big receivers. They're not as shifty, but they play a little bit more of a physical brand, a little more of a jump ball style. He still did get beat a couple times, but that's where he's at his best. Where I see that he struggles is kind of in and out of breaks, change of direction, the explosiveness, the short area quickness, stopping and starting. He was good against double moves. Depending on matchup, I'm okay with his man coverage, but in zone coverage, his run angles are kind of questionable, but he can go up and make some tackles. Some similarities here. You look at where Quentin Dunbar came from with Washington and then Seattle, and they played a lot of cover 3. He can shoot down. He's aggressive to jump down on underneath routes. He just needs to be more consistent and reliable as a tackler. I'm giving up a 0 pass rating on double moves early in his career. And when I watched him back, he's a pretty matched up based cornerback. I think if you threw him out there on Devontae Adams, we would have some problems. Getting him lined up on a guy like Tyrell Williams, I think he could find a little bit more success in that type of matchup. But that's where things got interesting. Looking at that 2019 season, I'm rolling through it thinking, okay, vet corner, depth corner, okay, it's helpful, it's nice. However, this is where things got interesting for me. And it was near the end of the 2019 season. And it was actually weird because it's against the LA Chargers, which of course Anthony Lynn was there. And this is when the Raiders made the decision to play him at safety. Okay, so they decided to move him to safety. Now, I first started to get this hint watching the Lions game when he made a pass break against TJ Hockenson. And I'm like, those matchups could be very beneficial because they usually have a lot more size. They're not as twitchy, not as quick in and out of breaks. But he has success against tight ends from the games that I was watching. He just didn't have tons of reps there. And that's when the Raiders decided, okay, we're going to move him to safety. They had some injuries at cornerback and safety. They decided to give him safety reps, and that's pretty much where he played the entire game. The Raiders would play a 2-shell look defensively, so you get the cover 2, cover 4, so he's going to fit. But they did a lot of post-snap movements as well. Like one guy would slide into the box, play some man coverage. The other guy could play single, high, deep safety. One of his best traits is probably run defense because he is physical. He attacks blockers. He's an okay tackler. He does have a little bit too many missed tackles, but he's an aggressive run defender. So he's got the traits to be a guy that can slide into the box. And when I think back to the Lions' last game against the Niners, I'm thinking they're putting Iffy in the box. They had some Tracy Walker in the box. And they had issues against George Kittle because George Kittle is obviously extremely talented. They didn't seem to trust necessarily Will Harris in those man-to-man coverage responsibilities against a tight end. But now with Iffy sliding to the outside, assuming that he's going to be your number 2 cornerback for this week, you would like to have another guy that can do things like that. That not only can play as a depth cornerback, but could also slide in the box. Slide back as a safety. And heck, he can play a little bit of slot cornerback as well, but it is pretty matchup based. And I think that's where he could actually bring some benefit to the Detroit Lions. Not only could he help you against tight ends, but he can still play man coverage. And when you watched him with the Chargers, it gave him some versatility because he could pass off routes to man-to-man coverage. It wasn't like I have to line up against tight end, and if they cross each other, I have to stick with the tight end. He could pass off and take the receiver because he is a cornerback at heart, background, so he understands how to play that. It's something that I thought the Lions would do a little bit more with Iffy this season. We saw them mix it in a little bit towards the second half because he could stop and run plays. He's more of a sub-package player is where the Lions used him week 1. However, that's where I think the Lions could potentially use Daryl Worley is a sub-package player. And of course, if for depth. I don't see him taking the role from Iffy. He is young enough right now where he still has that high ceiling, a 3rd round pick. He's only 26. Maybe he can click here. Maybe Pleasant can bring it out of him and he can find a lot of success. That would be awesome. But I view him like an Iffy, a guy that can come out there on sub-packages, give you a little bit of safety, give you a little bit in the box, can cover tight ends where we seem to have some issues, but also be depth at the outside cornerback where, if you need the depth there for whatever reason, he's a guy, whether him or Jerry Jacobs, Bobby Price, whoever the Lions would decide to go with, he can give you depth there that Nick Roby Coleman just can't give you because he doesn't play on the outside. So depth or outside, but a little bit more than that. I think he gives you some sub-package availability there. I like this coverage against tight ends. He plays a very physical brand, and he's super aggressive at the point of attack. He has the size, the length to do it. This is an interesting signing because I think he gives you a little bit more than just simply depth at cornerback. I think Iffy and Amani are the top 2 still heading into this week unless somehow he shocks everybody. As we said, they still have 2 roster spots open. The Lions could go out and grab another corner. Keep an eye on that. But those are the roster moves the Lions have made. Like I said, Tyrell, Kevin Strong both missed practice. We're going to keep an eye out to see if they make any more moves because I guarantee something's going to happen. And that could just be simply taking 2 players off the practice squad they like, put them on the active 53-man roster and be like, okay, let's go forward. And signing 2 players to the practice squad. But who would those 2 players be to the practice squad? Could be just Sage coming back. back? Could it be a new addition? Who could that be? We will wait and see, okay? And the Lions will have some time to see what Daryl Worley's about, because if they don't like him in practice, then of course, you know, they don't have to bring him up to the roster. So starting him off on the practice squad makes sense. But, you know, having some of those issues in the past, Quinn Dunbar had the same thing. You know, that's part of the reason they're available as free agents. So there's talent here. We'll see what happens. Obviously, that pick against Golladay was ridiculous. But either way, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Pat, for watching, and I'm out.